Today's lecture is on teams and teamwork. Let's start out by looking at the difference between a group and a team. Okay? You have been working in groups for the most part. Groups are two or more people working together. Okay? You have teams that are an interdependent collection of at least two or more individuals who share a common goal and joint responsibility for an outcome. Okay? And when we look at it, there's different types of teams. Some of the teams are functional teams. We've talked about this previously in organizational design. And those are teams that they come from the same department or functional area. Okay, so they're within. Then there's cross-functional teams. Members come from different backgrounds, different experience, different departments, or different functions. Okay, so there's a different source of where people come together. It's either within an organization, functional, or it's cross-functional within an organization. Then there's problem-solving teams. These are teams that are put together to solve problems. Okay, or make improvements, make something run better, faster, smarter. Then there's self-directed teams, and these are a little bit less common, and those are that they set out, these self-directed teams, to set their own goals and pursue different things, much more unstructured and not as common. Then there are teams that are put together to create new products, new processes, research, new businesses. And sometimes we have virtual teams that come together. We have global teams. So we have different purposes and sources. But remember, a group is two or more people working together, and teams and interdependent, that they're dependent on each other for a specific outcome with a common goal. And many times there's not a distinction between group and teams. And by what we're going to do today, hopefully we'll distinguish between what a group is, what a team is, how a team operates, and how can teams be successful. And then when teams are running into difficulties, we'll talk a little bit about those. So let's move on to taking a look at the differences between work groups. And the first is interdependence. In work groups, there's not a lot of interdependence on each other. In teams, there is dependence. In a group, it's individual goals. The goals aren't shared between everybody. In a team, they are. Accountability, generally in a group, it's with the individual. On a team, it's individual and the growth. The competencies to be successful working in a group is to focus on the task. That's how you will be successful. When you move into a team, there's also social skills needed. So you need to have competencies in social skills as well as task or work-related skills. Next is decision making. In the work groups, it's an individual or there's a leader. Okay? But in the teams, the decision making is shared. We're going to talk more about decision making. We talked about it previously, but we're going to talk about that idea of what consensus is within the concept of a team. Leadership, when there's a group, it's usually a fixed leader. And in a team, it's really a fixed or shared or rotate leadership. So those are sort of the differences that I'd like you to think about as we move forward. Why are teams good for organizations? Simplest one is more resources for problem solving. Okay, you have different experiences, different skills that can be put to bear in the team. There's improved creativity and innovation because you have many ideas, not the same point of view. Improved quality of decision making because people, if you're working in a team effectively, you're going deeper, you're solving problems, and you're thinking things through. And then there's the greater commitment to implementing things when they are done. If everybody has worked on a project, the ability to implement becomes a lot greater. People are motivated because they're part of this team and they like to have wins. As people, we want to be winners. There's better control and work discipline because there's more focus. And the individual ends up, honestly, with more satisfaction. What we see here is that there's been an evolution of teams. We talked about the teams and the different types in team leadership. And what we can see is that we have the functional team right here. That's where this process started of teamwork. Grouping individuals together by activity, which we've talked about. Very leader-centric, a vertical or command team. And that moved into cross-departmental teams, which need to set boundaries as we're doing it, which led to self-directed teams. As I said, cross-departmental teams are probably used much more so in business today. And when we look at startup and entrepreneurial ventures, they tend to engage in the self-directed team more than do more structured, larger organizations. But what we can see here is that in a cross-departmental team, the leader has to give up some level of power. And generally, these teams are special purpose teams to improve something, to come up with a new idea, improve a process, solve a problem, and then we look at the self-directed team, and it's self-managed and member-centric. So you can see the continuum is that in functional teams, you need more traditional leadership, and in the self-directed teams, you need team leadership. And there is a difference between them. When we look at what makes up a successful team just don't occur. You have to put together the group itself. And that starts with what are the individuals you'd like to participate on the team? What are their abilities? Okay? What can they do? What are their skills? What are their strengths? What are their values? Okay? What drives them? What personalities are they? Come back to Myers-Briggs. Diversity. And diversity means a lot of different things. It can mean education. It can be ethnicity. It can be heritage. It can be age. It can be gender. All sorts of things. But what are you trying to do? If everybody in the team looks the same, you're not going to get that mix that's going to give you the opportunity to truly move forward. Then the nature of the task. Successful teams, there's tries to be as much clarity around the task. And sometimes they can be very complex. Then you look at other inputs that go into this are the organizational setting. What are the resources available to the team? What's the technology the organization has? What are the structures? And we talked about some of these structures previously. What are the reward system? What information, how does information flow through the organization? Then you look at team size. How many people can you have on a team and really be effective? And sometimes it can be a bigger team. But, you start with a good size is always 5. You can get up to 10. And honestly, once you get up to a team greater than 15 or 20 people, keeping it focused is very, very difficult. Okay? And then do you want a team with even or odd members? And just think about that for a second. Should I have an odd or an even number of people? We're going to try on the projects that we're going to work on over the next 2 weeks, a team of 5. So odd, which 5 I think can be an optimal. Everybody has to participate, and we'll see how that goes. So those are the inputs that go into a team. What are the throughputs? This becomes very important because teams don't just start working together. Group people together. Even if we put them together, we get the right mix of people. We have a very clear task of what to do. We have the resources laid out. But what are the throughputs? What is the process that's going through? How do members transform from being a group into a team? Number one, there's norms. How are we going to behave? There's cohesion. Everybody in the group sees things the same way. Roles are clear. Roles are clear. Communication is present. There's a process for decision making. There's a process for conflict. And all of this becomes the process itself. We're going to spend some time talking about process because process is important because you want to get effective output, and that's an effective team. So if a team is effective, you're going to get a desired outcome. And that is going to, one, is going to make members satisfied, but it's going to lead to improvement in the company itself. There's an outcome, measurable outcome. So when we look at the successful team, I want you to look at it in the three components. What is going into the team, what's the process the team is following, and what is the outputs. And we don't always think about them. This is really, we have a lot of perceptions and we make assumptions about what teams are. But that becomes there. Now let's look at some of the roles that we have and what team leaders actually do in a team. And these can be distributed out to members of the team. One person doesn't have to be the leader who does everything. Okay, there can be multiple leaders with different tasks. And if we look, they provide task activities. They initiate something. They share information. They elaborate. They give opinion. They summarize things. Okay? And then one of the more important things is they avoid and discourage disruptive activities. We're going to talk about disruptive activities and what gets in the way of teams, but their leaders are trying to avoid aggressiveness, competition, withdrawal, horsing around, and other things just to keep the team on track. And then they provide maintenance activities, encouragement, try to reduce tension, following. So these are different roles that happen. So that's the inputs that go into a team. Now, I said a team does not just occur. Okay? It goes through a process. The first one is the 5 stages of team development. And this is something that's come out of a book by the name of Bruce Tuckman, Developmental Sequence in Small Groups. The citing is there, and it's been used for, as you can see, that's going back, that's almost 50 years of usage. And it goes through what we'll say is 5 steps of team development. The first is forming, and that's when a team comes together, they're getting to know each other, they talk about the skills that people, what are they going to work on, they identify each person's strength and their potential contribution to the team. So that's the forming stage. People feel good at the forming stage. Then there is a storming stage. And this is once things are set up, individuals tend to respond differently. There can be conflict and disagreement. You need to have storming. You don't just go from forming a team to performing. So you got to form, you got to storm, and then you norm, your normalization. And that's establishment of order. Roles become clearer. Processes and expectations are more established and thought through. Then we move on to performing. And that's when everybody is working together and problem solving, doing what the team needs to do. And the last stage is really for a team to go away, adjourning. The task is completed and move on. Teams don't live forever. They have this purpose. So I want you to keep thinking about forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, because those are the important parts of team development. And this graph simply shows us that the focus on task starts out pretty high, then it drops down, but as relationship builds, there's a direct relationship to focus on the task and the outcome. When we look at team development, we see some characteristics that are happening when a team is forming. It tends to be very polite, very impersonal, just nice stuff. People tend to be a little guarded. We don't always jump in and say what's on our mind. And you sort of just play with what's going on, okay? Then we move to storming. And when you get into storming, there's confrontation, conflict. Some people opt out, don't want to participate. There can be difficulties. It seems like no progress is being made, that you're stuck in a rut. Then when you go back to norming, established processes are in place, there's feedback, you know how to cope with issues, develop skills, and then when it becomes performing, it's flexible, resourceful, open, effective, supportive, and more satisfied. So you really come into this equation being somewhat a little skeptical and working your way through. So that's one look at that. The other one here I think is interesting because it really gives us an opportunity to look at the characteristics of what's going on in the team, but also what a manager or leader will do. They make decisions about each other. You're working with somebody you don't know, and you sort of have to evaluate them to see how they're going to come up. You're going to end up with sort of a safe pattern. What are they like? What's the manager's role in this? Provide structure to the team. Make sure tasks and responsibilities are clear. Encouraging people to participate. 100% participation. So that's bringing people in. Share information with the team. Facilitate and encourage learning about others and encouraging open communication. So at this time, I'm trying to encourage the team to form. I'm then going to move on to storming. This is when conflict comes in. This is okay that you may not feel that you're in any sense of control or direction. You need to work through this stage. I have seen teams who've gotten into storming and they couldn't get beyond it. What's the role of the manager or leader in that case? Help team members learn how to respect each other. Create a plan for making decisions. Facilitating a plan for conflict resolution. We're going to talk about that too, so you have an idea of what we're talking about. Norming, when you're coming back to normal, that's an encouragement, really to encourage, to recognize, and to be open. Okay? Performing, again, working together. Make the team, help with the team to set goals. Find ways that they can excel, remove roadblocks. Recognize performance. How do you develop people and move them to the next level? Achieved its goals when it's transforming, adjourning, success, deciding what you do. We look at some of the other characteristics as we move forward. And again, some of these are there. Questioning, socializing, a display of eagerness, excitement, focusing on the group's purpose, sticking to safe topics. Okay, characteristics of storming. We looked at that. Norming, they use the word reconciliation, relief, lowered anxiety. People are engaged and supportive. And that cohesion comes into play. Characteristics, interdependence. When we realize we're interdependent, it's a healthy system. Ability as a team to effectively produce work. And balance of task and process. One of the more important things, and we talked about this, and I'm going to just go back, so just bear with me as I go back. Here on this screen, we see there's the inputs, the process, and then the outputs. Without the process, teams simply don't work. Okay? They need a process. So it ranges from taking the lead to make things move, normalizing, recognition of the group's efforts, monitor the energy, celebrate, guide, encourage, acknowledge, provide opportunity for team evaluations. Opportunities. Now, what we have seen is that when we're looking at effective and ineffective teams, that we see that in the different stages, teams will go through this, and when they're coming out of that storming into norming, it's what we'll call the critical side, critical zone. And as we can see here, that an effective teams, there's process gains. The gains are greater than the losses. An ineffective team, we have processes that are greater than the gains. So are we going forward or are we going backwards? So effective teams, the process gains exceed the losses. Ineffective. And it's all coming out of that storming phase, okay, on that trajectory. So the team's ability to get through the storming and into a fully norming team is going to make the difference between an effective team and an ineffective team. Now, when you're going to create effective teams, the first thing you need is clear roles. Okay. The behaviors and tasks that each member is expected to perform because of their position. We need a leader. There's a facilitator who's focused on process, and every team member needs to have a role, which the team decides. In addition to a leader, a facilitator, and the difference between a leader and facilitator is a facilitator focuses on process, not so much about leader. And a lot of times on some teams, a facilitator can't be involved in the detail of what's going on. They're facilitating the process. Other roles that exist within a team is there's a timekeeper, okay, a scribe, somebody keeping track of the time, somebody keeping track of what is done. So these are roles that exist on every team to be most effective. And we look at the other team members, and there's different roles. And there's task specialist roles. These are people on the team, and you're going to initiate ideas, give opinions, seek information, summarize. And I think when you look at, there's different pieces of communication. We talk about that in that is really the first step is you can share information, sharing of facts. You can ask questions to be able to go deeper into a process. You can test your understanding. Is this what you said? Are you understanding what people in the group have said? And sometimes you can summarize what people said. And remember, there's clarification. Let me test my understanding to clarify what's going on. And summarizing is summarizing what has been suggested or proposed. And then everybody on a team, now remember, if you're a group working, it's all about task specialists, okay? And in a team, you sort of have this social emotional role where you have to play with other people. And that means there's a component of encouragement. How can we work together, bringing people in? How can we make sure there's no tension? And how can we have follow and compromise? And I think you've seen in some of the work that you've done here in this class, based on my observation and in my opinion, I think you're starting to get a sense of that because I've watched you work throughout this semester. And we've done a lot of different activities, some of them for credit, others we just did. And I think there's a greater ability to work together. And I think we're going to see that come out in this activity. That's why I'm going to suggest you keep the same groups that you did for the previous activity. A couple of things, definition, norms. Norms are simply shared rules, standards, guidelines for team members about behavior and performance. Okay? It provides a frame of reference for what's expected and acceptable. Okay, and a lot of times it's important for a team up front, once they get to know each other, is to say, what are the rules that we're going to operate under? What are our norms? Okay, and that becomes a very important thing that you know what the norms are. Because remember, you're coming together as a group to try to achieve something. So we have norms. And norms develop in a couple of different ways. One, it's what is our first behavior. We all know how we want to be treated. We know what our expectations are, and that's the behavior. And then there's specific, explicit leader statements, and that results in team norms. Yes, this does look like, you got it, personal behaviors, situational. Okay? And so, but they're coming together to produce the team norms. We're going to have an opportunity of doing that. The first thing is I want to talk about is team efficacy. And that's a team's shared belief that it can organize and execute the behaviors necessary. This is the belief that the team can do something, that it can organize. Cohesiveness sometimes is a broad use, but it refers to the degree to which members are attracted to the team and its members, and how loyal they are to the team and each other. Trust. That's the glue that holds teams together. You have to trust people. There has to be cohesiveness. And this again comes into play when we look at outcomes. And when we look at outcomes, on this here we have, if there's high cohesiveness and negative performance norms, we're going to have low performance, but everybody's going to be behind it. If they're both low, you're going to have low to moderate performance, and weak commitment is going to be there. People aren't going to be excited about it, nor will they be able to implement it. So what we're really looking for is high cohesiveness, which leads to high performance. A positive reference norm with low adhesiveness will get us moderate performance. So we're really focusing here on this high performance. Okay? So when want to make a team better, is the first thing to make sure is we want a real team, not just a team in a name only. And if you've been watching over the beginning of the semester, I have not referred to the groups you're working in as a team. I've always referred to them as groups. Okay? This is where we're going to make a transition for the next 2 weeks and focus on team. So there's going to be more focus on process. A team has to have compelling direction, know where it's going. It has to have an enabling structure that facilitates teamwork. Okay? And it operates within a supportive organizational content. A team can't come together without an organization being supportive. And it has effective coaching. And coaching is different than leading. And coaching is helping people think, identifying their strengths, their weaknesses, suggesting ways they can improve and do better, giving them ideas, challenging them, helping them solve problems. So coaches become very effective. And again, when you look at this together, what we're really looking at for an effective team, I'm not sure why that does that, guys. There we go. Nope. Nope. There we go. Is that effective teams come together when you have both satisfied team members, and a good outcome, and an improved ability to work together. And when that all comes together in the right mix is when we have this team effectiveness. Teams that deliver on all three of these components are the most effective. Okay? And it's because of this mix of product, the ability to work together, and member satisfaction that really lead to very high performing teams. Now, when we look at team competencies, let's look at some of them, and I'm going to put them all up right here and then just talk about them briefly. Is what you have is you have goal setting and performance management. What's the goal? How are we going to manage our performance? What's the planning and coordination that needs to go in this? Collaborative problem solving. How are we going to solve the problem? Communication and conflict. So resolution. So these are the team competencies that we see. And there are certain elements that lead to a high-performing team. And when we look at this here, we can see that these are the 5 pillars, if you will, that lead to high-performing teams. One, that they have a compelling purpose, something specific, explicit metrics. How will we do that? Diversity of skills and defined roles. An effective team size. Okay, that it can play together, that it has decision authority on how to achieve the goals. And we talked about decision authority 2 weeks ago, so keep that in mind. And then they have the right level of support and coaching. Those are the elements that lead to high performance teams.